Well, welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We are still in our celebration honoring the life and the legacy of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in the program. But we have to talk about those things that are in the news. And of course, we're starting off tonight with the conversation and discussing the Israel-United States strike against Iran. And those of you who thought that this was the better choice, this is what you voted for. Those of you who are saying that's not what you voted for, the truth of the matter is this is what you voted for. And you can't pretend that you didn't know, because the one thing that I do have to give this president credit for is telling you and telegraphing to you exactly what they were going to do. And they are pretty much doing what they said they are going to do in a large degree. Now, of course, they lied. We don't know really how to differentiate their reality from their truth or lack of thereof, what they're sharing with us. We all know that on Saturday night, that about 48 hours ago, that Israel and the United States sent airstrikes to Iran, killing their supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. There are those who are saying that they are not aggrieved or saddened for the loss of the life of Khamenei. Now, for those of you who don't really understand what the Ayatollah's position is, the Ayatollah position in the Muslim world is that he is, to many in the Muslim world, the equivalent of what the Pope is to the Catholic community. So he is their supreme leader in terms of their faith commitment, and that's what many in the Muslim world or the Islamic faith recognize him as their supreme spiritual leader. Now, he also has influence over public policy, and in a large degree, there are reports that they're responsible for the deaths of thousands of people that oppose the Ayatollah. And then you have those who worship Khamenei, but they have serious humanitarian concerns and issues over in Iran. And we're supposed to have some experts that were coming on, because this is such a fast moving situation that continues to evolve. There were a couple of people I was supposed to have on from the University of Chicago, and then I was supposed to have on Colin Clarke, who just before the program said that they were not going to be able to come on, but promised to come on at a later date to help us to really understand, or at least give us some insight as to what the real situation is, because we really don't know what the real objective is, because the president and his Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, or whatever it is that they want to identify with it, has not clearly defined to us what the objective is. Although we just recently heard from the Secretary of State explaining to us what he says that the objective is. He gave us a clearer explanation of what the objective is, more so than the president or the Secretary of War or the Secretary of Defense. This is Marco Rubio in his recent press conference that he gave, or certainly question and answers that he gave just about an hour ago, telling us what the objective of the mission is in this attack. Take a listen.
So two things, and two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping.
Let's watch that one more time.
So two things, and two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping.
Well, of course, you know, he used the term ballistic missions, right? He used the term ballistic missions. Now, of course, the president said that they obliterated back in June their nuclear capabilities because they were a week away from having a nuclear bomb. Now, we are told by many that the United States is of no threat from Iran, that Iran is not a threat to the United States whatsoever. Iran is a threat to Israel. Why does Israel have such a clutch on the United States, on the administration? We're not quite clear as to what and why that is. But clearly, Benjamin Netanyahu sees this administration as a great leader of the world because they are supporting exactly what he wants to do. And maybe the actions that Benjamin Netanyahu is taking is to try to prevent himself from being held accountable, because there are allegations and there are charges that if he is out of office, or once he's out of office, that he is going to have to face in Israel, and that he is desperately doing what he thinks that he needs to do in order to prevent himself from being held accountable to the justice in Israel. So for us, Iran was not a threat to the United States. Now, there are no other countries, there were no other countries that were in support of the United States and Israel attacking Iran. They could not get any support from any of the other countries, including Europe, to attack Iran. Now, Iran is striking, other places like Iraq and Baghdad and Lebanon, these other places where they are striking these areas. We now have 6 U.S. American soldiers that are dead. We lost 3 fighter jets as a result of this. And the president is saying that this will go 4 to 5 weeks, maybe longer, or maybe sooner. But there is certainly very little support from the United States and very little support from the American public for this. I think the latest poll that was taken was 27%. And typically, when a president or an administration is going to war, typically they come before Congress, which is required by the War Powers Resolution. And this is an act that is in violation of the War Powers Resolution. They go to Congress and they have debate, and then Congress gives the authorization or not for the president to go to war. That's why the Constitution was written, so that we don't have this authoritarianism or this king-like decision. We know that Donald Trump does not respect laws. For that purpose, he's a 34-count convicted criminal. We do have a criminal serving as president of the United States. And I think that it is certainly fitting that this president would conduct themselves in this way, because he does not appear to be a respecter of laws except for the ones that he sets or he believes that are served to the interest of any decisions that he wants to make. We heard from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff today, Dan King, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, and of course the president said that everyone wanted Iran stopped, but didn't have the courage to say it or the courage to do it. So, but these are just things that the president's saying. I'm not suggesting that what he was saying is correct, and we don't have any evidence of what he's saying is correct other than what he has said. But there is no evidence that everybody else wanted Iran stopped. Wanted Iran stopped for what? According to what we were told, that they stopped Iran from developing a nuclear weapon back in June. And if Iran is as weak as we were told that they are, they didn't have the capabilities of 7 months later developing a nuclear weapon. Now you have Marco Rubio, who is very carefully using the words ballistic arsenal. He never once said nuclear, but he's using the term ballistic arsenal. Now he may be using that term to make sure that he protects himself from any accountability once he's out of office, or from potentially being impeached themselves. Now, there are those who are saying that when the Democrats take control of the House and take control of the Senate, that this is grounds for impeachment. And I go back, way back to Richard Nixon, where Barbara Jordan, who was a junior freshman, I shouldn't say junior, but she was a freshman Congress representative at the time, and these were her words.
If the impeachment provision in the Constitution of the United States will not reach the offenses charged here, then perhaps that 18th century Constitution should be abandoned to a 20th century paper shredder.
And in this case, the 21st century paper shredder. In other words, she's saying that if the evidence that is presented does not meet the level of impeachment, then maybe that part of the Constitution needs to be relegated to a paper shredder. We don't have any idea of what the fallout is going to be here, And I know that there may be some of you who are saying, well, why do we care about this? And why is this going to impact? Well, let's see what you have to say when you go to the fuel pump to fill up your car over the next week or so. And if oil prices change and the barrel of the cost of oil increases, you could be seeing $4, $5 gallon of gas. That's why you should care about it, because it does have an impact on us. And we should care about decisions that anybody that is in elective office that are making, that certainly is going to impact the lives of other Americans, just as this decision has impacted the lives of 6 soldiers that are gone because of this decision to attack Iran. And it is being called a war of choice, not a war of necessity, certainly not a war of defense, based on those who we have in these positions, and certainly experts from around the globe and certainly around the country who are all saying that 2 things. One, this was a effective, sophisticated military operation, but whether it was a necessary military operation is where they draw the line. And yet the president has not come out and has not spoken to the American people to explain to the American people what the objective is, except for we got an objective explanation from the Secretary of State, which we may see that person, Marco Rubio, he may be retracting what he said, or coming out making some excuse from what he said once the president hears what he said and then scolds him on what he said and told him to go clean it up. We had Lindsey Graham out on the Sunday shows clearly lying, saying that the president is not required to go before Congress to get authorization from Congress to go to war. It is in violation of the War Powers Act. If it is not in violation of the War Powers Act, what is the purpose of the War Powers Act? And the purpose of the War Powers Act is to ensure that no single individual, the President of the United States, can put and throw the country at war without Congress giving authorization. Now, Congress gave authorization to George W. Bush when we went to war in Iraq to find not even a can of Raid spray, even after the inspectors had gone in 3 times to say that there was no evidence of any weapons of mass destruction. That war was personal then, and this mission and war is personal now. George W. Bush even said out loud that Saddam Hussein was attempting to kill his father. And this president said in one of his news releases that he got them before they got him, because there were allegedly rumors that Iran wanted to murder Donald Trump. Now, of course, Donald Trump, who said that Kamala Harris, if she became the president, was going to get us into World War III, and that if he became the president, he would be the president of peace. Now, maybe he was a candidate for the presidency of peace, but he certainly is not the president of peace.
If I win, we will have peace in the world again. I guarantee we will have peace in the world again. A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
We will keep America out of foolish, stupid, ridiculous foreign wars.
Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
No new war. We don't need the wars. Foreign lands, countries you've never heard of, countries that don't even want us there.
Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved.
We were crazy what we did. We had these endless wars. They go on for 21, 22 years, spending billions and billions of dollars.
Earlier today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action, and sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more.
The plan is to get out of endless wars, to bring our soldiers back home, to not be policing agents all over the world.
No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
Well, that's very true, because that's exactly what he did. Now, what he was talking about in there, that was when this was back in 2011 when Barack Obama was president, and Barack Obama was up for re-election at the time. But how true that is today, that this president sent 2 real estate investors to negotiate international affairs, that neither of them have that sort of experience. Now, I'm in the real estate business, and think that I am a fairly decent negotiator in real estate. That doesn't mean that I would be a fairly decent negotiator on matters that I really don't understand. And for the president to send 2 real estate investors to negotiate on international affairs, and by the way, they were not successful at reaching an agreement that the Iranians would agree to. In other words, taking the Iranians what the United States wanted, or should I say what the president wanted, to the Iranians, and the Iranians basically bounced them out on their real estate heads. So I would no more want to send or to go and see a dentist because he or she is well trained in that area, to have them to take a look at a joint problem that I might have, or an orthopedic condition that I may need to have addressed. That's precisely what the president did. Sent 2 real estate people to go to Iran and to try and negotiate international treaties for which they know nothing about. I don't care how many billions of dollars that they have, because one is extraordinarily wealthy does not make them capable. But this, for me, is, and I am praying that this situation does not get worse. That it does not get worse. And I am praying that what the president did say, that this will be over quickly. And if typically, if that is the case, if it's over quickly, then there will not be more bloodshed. There will not be more of our soldiers being sacrificed because of someone's egotistical, out of control, unrestrained decisions. I am hoping that that is the case. I'm praying that that is the case, that this situation does not get any worse. But from all of the people, certainly politically, all of the people who are experts in these areas, retired generals, retired ambassadors, who are all saying the same thing across the board, that they don't understand, and it is not clear on what the actual mission is, other than what we heard from Marco Rubio. That's what we heard. So that's the only clarity that we have in terms of what the actual mission is. Or should I say some clarity of what the actual mission is. See, this is why it is important for us as voters, for us as citizens, not to play this zero-sum political tantrums that we have demonizing the Democratic Party because there are some policies that either you don't understand or that you don't agree with. I was at Rainbow Push this past week for the celebration and visitation of Reverend Jackson. I'm going to get into that in just a couple of minutes. And ran into somebody there, and they were saying to me, and I'm not even going to call their names, were saying to me that, you know, that they didn't support Brandon Johnson because of what happened with the migrants and that sort of thing. And the bottom line is that, like many other people, they didn't understand, and they were distracted by something that we should not have been distracted by. Suggesting that we, the city of Chicago, is spending money on migrants, and we're not spending money on people who need it here, homeless people, that sort of thing. And the money that we spent should be spent on people who need it here. Well, the fact of the matter is, I was in court just a few weeks ago because there is a case in court where the city is suing. It has some cases that have been consolidated. There's about 38 cases that are consolidated of the bus companies that violated the law in transporting the migrants from Texas to here. And the mayor's Office of Management and Emergency Management person testified that the $42 million that was spent to certainly deal with the migrants and making sure that we didn't have a bunch of people running around that could even put citizens of Chicago at more risk. The $42 million that was spent, and I certainly tried to convey that message through this program, that the $42 million that was spent has been reimbursed from the federal government. Why was the money reimbursed from the federal government? Is because the federal government, it is required that any actions related to immigration that are absorbed by a local or a state, the federal government is by law required to reimburse those entities. That's the law. So the city of Chicago didn't lose any money taking care of temporarily, making sure that these people were not just running around the city and that could potentially be putting other people at risk, because when you have people in desperate situations, that is what can happen. So the $42 million that we spent was $42 million. Every dollar of it was reimbursed by the federal government. Unfortunately, the mayor and the mayor's administration did a horrible job at advising the public of that fact. And it is a fact. It was testified in court. I'll be back in court again following this case. Now, I will say that in that, I learned some other things in that case, that this was not a surprise to the mayor's office that these buses were coming. There were people in the administration communicating with the people, at Texas that these buses were coming. So the management of that certainly should have been better. And it certainly was debacle by the city of Chicago, without question. And I question whether or not some of the people that I heard testifying in that court proceeding, and I will let you know when the next court date is. I don't have that date with me, because you might want to, if you've got time, you might want to go and sit in and listen to the testimony of this. You will learn some things, like I learned some things there, and wondered why the city of Chicago did not do a better job at messaging to the public its responsibility, its role, whether or not we were a sanctuary city or not, or a sanctuary state or not. When you have to deal with human beings that are placed in your city, your county, your state, you have a responsibility to protect the citizens of your state. And protecting the citizens of your state also includes when you have other people that are brought into your city or your county or your state, that you have to deal with those circumstances. But my point is that it is a mistake to play the zero-sum game. That, well, I'm going to jump out of the frying pan into the fire type attitude, or I'm just going to blow up the entire system because the radio didn't work right. I'm going to just blow up the car because my tires run a little rough. It's not riding as smooth as I would like to ride. But if the car is not riding as smooth as you would like to ride, blowing up the car doesn't make any sense. Maybe I just need to replace the tires. I replace the tires, then the entire car runs a whole lot smoother. Or the car might be running a little rough because I haven't changed the oil as frequently as required. So maybe I should go change the oil in the car, and the car will run a little bit better. It'll get better mileage. It will run a little bit smoother. The point is that is what has happened to many of us. That's what happened to many of us. And we've dug our heels in because of our stubbornness. We've dug our heels in because of our egos, that we don't want to acknowledge that might have been not such a good choice. That might not have been such a good methodology. And that's what we did in the election over a year ago, when this country decided to elect this man as president of the United States, because you thought that this person who showed you, who telegraphed to you when they were in office in 2016, and the only reason they were not able to do the damage that we see being exacted now is because there were still people there that could restrain the president, and there were people there that would not carry out the president's little temper tantrums. And they were not sycophants. These were people who were career servers of this country, who basically showed and demonstrated to the president some restraint, that we cannot do what it is that you are suggesting or that you would like to do. Those people do not exist in this administration, and you are seeing the results of that. And there are many of you who do not agree with what is happening. There are many of you who may not publicly acknowledge it, and you don't have to publicly acknowledge it. I would just hope that you would learn from it. You would learn from it, and that you would do a deeper dive at understanding the difference between what we have now and what we would have had, and what we had with the past administration. I have gone through the information with you on how public policies passed under the previous administration, under the Biden-Harris administration, would have substantially, and was starting to, impact in a very positive way the lives of Black people in this country, and certainly the lives of people who had been left out and locked out, and the poor. I've gone through that with you on several occasions. I won't go, excuse me, I won't go through it tonight, but I will go through it in the future days, just to remind us of the public policy, sometimes we get caught up in personality rather than looking at the substance of the policies that has come out of those political camps. And there were some great policies that in those policies were representative of equity for our community through the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, the American Rescue 1 and American Rescue 2. All of those bills had enormous investments in it that would have directly and did directly impact the Black community. $16.5 billion that were invested in HBCUs. A lot of that money is being reversed. You now have the Department of Homeland Security, or ICE. Their budget is more than that of our National Marines, because they have stripped money from those agencies to give it to untrained people with a gun. And here we have a guy who's standing in front of a podium with a hat on, telling us about what they did and sending Marines and soldiers to their deaths. And then, in a very careless way, talking about it is going to happen again. Well, in the weeks to come, we're going to have some experts. We're going to have that panel to come back on so that they can explain it to you and explain it to us so that we can understand, because this is going to, unfortunately, it is going to play out. And again, I am praying that it doesn't get any worse than it already is. The reality of that and the likelihood of that is very, very low, but I'm still praying and hoping that it doesn't get worse than it is. But it has, because earlier this morning we woke up, there were 3 dead American soldiers. Now there are 6. And since this program has been on the air for 42 minutes, I don't know what has happened yet. I haven't seen anything that have come across my reel that has said that there has been any further casualties as a result of this decision. But we shall see. All right, changing gears a little bit, something a little more local and of good news. We got a recent decision on, you may have seen the press conference that we did on last Tuesday, that on the 19th of February, the court issued an order that the city of Chicago had engaged in excessive fines and fees and certified a class action lawsuit that we will be recovering potentially $100 million to $120 million in refunds. So if you were one of those persons, you could potentially get about $150 refund from the city of Chicago. So that decision came back where, based on that ruling, that the Cook County judge determined that the city of Chicago overtried and overcharged residents of the city of Chicago in nearly 2 million parking and city stickers between 2012 and 2022. The judgment could be about somewhere between 104 and 120 million dollars between the fines themselves and the interest that the city is required to pay as a penalty to the motorists. So Judge William Sullivan found that the city violated the Illinois law, which caps the fines of parking compliance and city stickers to $250. So remember when Rahm Emanuel decided that he was going to get rid of the head tax, and then he imposed the red light cameras and speed cameras and this $200 fine if you did not have your city sticker. Now, I know that some of you ask, well, what does the city sticker represent? The city sticker represents just that, a sticker for which you pay $150 or $140 or whatever the cost is for the ticket, for the sticker now, so that you can stick it on your windshield. It is called a city tax. That's all it is. It is a city tax. Other municipalities have them, but they don't charge nearly what the city of Chicago. If you go out in Evergreen, I think it's $25 or $30 for a city sticker. There are some municipalities that have completely gotten away from it. Some states have completely gotten away from that tax, because that's all it is a tax. It serves no other purpose other than to charge a tax so that it can support the budget. And we don't know how many jobs that it does, but I believe we can find that out. So, so in this case, the total impact of the ruling mandates refunds of approximately $69.6 million in overcharges, plus roughly $34 million in interest, which brings that total somewhere nearly around $104 million to $163 million. So it's probably going to fall somewhere around $120 million. Now, the city of Chicago had the opportunity to settle this case, but the city of Chicago and the Department of Law. Now, this did not start under the Johnson administration. This started under the Rahm Emanuel administration. Rahm Emanuel decided to get rid of the corporate head tax and to shift that burden onto everyday working people and, of course, poor people. So, and what they did was, this is how we're going to make up for it, is that they changed the ordinance to fining you $200 for not having your city sticker. And the city council passed the resolution, passed the ordinance that says that you could get multiple tickets, multiple $200 tickets in the same day, the same week, or each day that they found you or found your car without having your city sticker displayed. Well, that's a violation of the state law. And when we went to city council members, telling city council members that they were violating the law, Black city council members, because more than 40% of the city council, they weren't 40% back then, was still significant back then, represent communities that are hardest hit communities from fines and fees, did absolutely nothing about it. Nothing. Didn't listen to the warning signs. So we had to file a lawsuit. And it took 8 years for this to come to conclusion, or certainly nearing the conclusion. Now the city of Chicago says that they are considering their options. Well, let me help you understand this. The facts are the facts. The law is the law. So you can have an option to appeal it, but under what grounds will you appeal it? Because the facts are the facts. The facts are not going to change. The evidence is not going to change. You violated the law. The same way that the city violated the law and violating due process when we were able to win the $125 million debt reduction and $38 million class action against the city for violating due process in enforcing tickets on red light camera tickets. So they have a right to appeal because that's the way it works. That's the state statute. They have a right to do it. But it's not going to change the facts. And the longer that this goes, the interest continues to accrue that will have to be paid. Now, let's assume that it's $120 million. Well, just like your insurance policy on your car, you have a deductible. The city has a deductible, and the city's deductible, I believe, is the first $15 million the city has to pay, and then the balance, the insurance company will cover that cost. In this case, the city will have to refund. So if you got 2 tickets, which are $400, the $250, it's not that the city violated having this fine in place, but what the city did violate was the cap that the law allows. And so we challenge that. And so that if you got a ticket of $400, and let's say you didn't pay the $400 and the city sent this to the law firm that does the collections, and you ended up paying the $400 plus you had to pay a $44 collection fee. Well, you get the $150 plus the $44 that was tacked on to that $150 to collect $150. So you don't get the $250, but you certainly get the $150 plus the interest on that. So you could be in place to receive, if you receive one of those city sticker violations, or certainly if you ended up paying $400 or more than the $250. So we will keep you posted on that. But this is the only thing that the city seems to understand, or certainly seems to respond to. And in some degree, they're acting like our president, whether it's this administration or previous administrations. This administration and its predecessors, its 2 predecessors, Rahm Emanuel and Lori Lightfoot. Rahm Emanuel started speed cameras and imposed this $200 fine on city stickers. Lori Lightfoot lowered the threshold on speed cameras. Rahm Emanuel decided to show favor to the corporations and take the corporate head tax, but certainly shift the burden of that onto working people and poor people. Lori Lightfoot decided we can generate more revenue her administration decided we can generate more revenue if we continue to punish people who are driving, or if we just start punishing people who are driving 6, 7, 8 miles over the speed limit. People who are driving 6, 7, 8 miles over the speed limit are not your problem. People who are driving 20 and 25 miles over the speed limit are largely the problem. And these are the people who cause more of the fatal traffic crashes. How do we know that? Because we've analyzed the traffic data, which shows, and the crash data, which shows that even now we have 100 more fatal car accidents that have to do with excessive speeding in the city of Chicago, not from people who are driving 6, 7, and 8 miles over the speed limit, not even people who are driving 9 or 10 miles over the speed limit. If you're driving 15 or 20 miles over the speed limit, you should get a ticket. You probably should get a heavier ticket. I'm not saying that we should not have any enforcement, but what I'm saying is the city cannot violate your rights or your constitutional protections in order for them to be able to generate revenue to balance their budgets. And so that is where the grievance comes into place. And so the city only understands that we will comply if you catch us. It is a catch us if you can seeming attitude by the city of Chicago. So we've sued them on the violation of due process for speed cameras as well as red light cameras. We've sued them on this violation, violating the law on capping fines at $250. So even when they find out that they are violating the law, they continue to do it, basically saying, catch us if you can. Why? Because they believe that there are not more people out there like us that will take them on or that are going to spend time investigating them. Well, this has only fueled the question of that we need to now look at more of the city's practices, because we now know that the city is okay with violating the law as long as they don't get caught. So they are hypocrites in the sense that they want for you to walk a chalk line, and that if you don't walk that chalk line, that if you drive 1 more mile over the speed limit than is allowed, then we're going to tax you. Or they are saying we're going to put more speed cameras out that have a margin of error in it, by the way, and we're going to put, we're going to lower the threshold, and that you can drive as fast as you like, as long as you pay the tickets. Drive as fast as you like. Go down these roads, get these speed camera tickets as fast as you like. Run red lights wherever we have red light cameras as much as you want. Just make sure that you pay the fine. You just have to pay the ticket, but you can drive as fast as you like. You can run as many red light cameras as you like if you are willing to pay the fine. That's what the city is essentially saying. We're not really concerned about real traffic safety. We're not concerned about enforcing any type of real traffic safety. Just keep doing what you're doing. Make sure you send in those payments. Because that $65 million, that $80 million a year, that's easy money for us. What's the $80 million doesn't always go, all of it doesn't go to the city. They basically have hired a private company that is enforcing state law. We really have an issue with that because we believe that that violates the Constitution. We have not been successful at getting the courts to see it that way, but it doesn't mean that that's not the law. But we're going to continue to press that forward. Now, that is part and parcel That is one area, but it is part and parcel that we could have that same problem across the board, where the city is essentially saying, catch us if you can. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to hold the city accountable to make sure that they have enforcement, but the city has to follow the law in that enforcement. So make sure that you stay tuned right here with me every Monday night. And you will be posting notice on my Facebook page, on social media, to keep you apprised as to what's going on with this lawsuit. We have another class action lawsuit that we filed out in Crestwood. Crestwood did change the intersection. If you go to if you go out to Crestwood and you go to CalSag and Cicero, which is right there where the Portillo's is, it's like 138th or something like that, and Cicero, but it says CalSag, where that right turn was, where there was no signal, and the city was imposing red light camera violations on people that didn't even have a traffic signal. Well, we filed a class action lawsuit. That class action lawsuit has been certified by a judge. And so we are still working on it. Now, class action lawsuits are very, very difficult. They're not easy lawsuits. They're just not. They take a lot of money to put at risk on class action lawsuits. And there is no such thing as a guarantee. So, but we have been successful at getting 3 of them certified, 2 of them decisions on behalf of the public, on behalf of the citizens. But that is what we have to do when it comes to our government. It is holding our government accountable. It is not that that we don't support our government. We certainly should support our government, but we certainly should make sure that our government is being held accountable to it. But it takes all of us to be engaged in order to make that happen. We can do that on a grander scale if there are more of us involved with that. So if you want to commit to getting involved, then I would ask you to text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. I'll put it in the chat for you if you're not there, or if you have not already become a part of 10 by 10 to win. But we have to exert our strength and our power. And we exert our strength and our power whenever it is that we bring ourselves, organize ourselves in a large enough mass where we could be significant influencers of people who are in public office, because that's what they recognize. They recognize well-organized numbers. That's what they recognize, and that's what they respond to. When we are not, then what they do is they know that we are a fractionized vote, and they exploit that for their own personal gain. We put them back in office, and they legislate on behalf of other people who are writing checks for their campaign. So we should put ourselves in that position. All right, we're going to be talking more about that in the weeks to come. So stay tuned for that, and I'll keep you apprised of that. Make sure that you go to my YouTube page at Mark J. Wallace, The People's Show. If you have not registered, please subscribe there, like, and share. It is 100% free. There is no cost to subscribe at the YouTube channel. Please share it with others and ask them to come and join us on the program. We're going to be working even harder to bring you experts and greater information that is important for us to know so that we can navigate through these systems to make things better for our communities. I'm sorry, I just don't do the gossip columns or things that people find a little more juicy, but I want to get information out to us that's going to help us be more impactful to improve the conditions of our community. All right, we're going to switch gears here to continuing the celebration of Jesse Lewis Jackson, who made his transition on February the 17th. And he is being celebrated down in South Carolina at this very moment. He's being celebrated down in South Carolina, where they are holding a special memorial service for him in California. I'm sorry, in South Carolina, which is where he was born and raised. And so he will be down there. And then he will go from there to Washington, D.C., and then he'll be back here on Friday at the House of Hope from 10 o'clock until 2. There will be a celebration there, and then there will be a private celebration at Rainbow Push on Saturday morning. So you can, if you like, certainly you can go there on Friday at the House of Hope. The House of Hope, I believe, seats like 10,800 people. So you certainly have a better chance at getting there because Rainbow Push only holds 800. But that's where his final homegoing service will be held at Rainbow Push, and then he'll be privately interned at Oakwood Cemetery. And there was a story about, and even though he's going to be interned at Oakwood Cemetery, there is a story that I'm reminded of an old lady that lived in a certain town. And every day at about 5 o'clock, she would be coming down the street and she would go into this corner store. And in this corner store, she would get this little piece of bread and a container of milk. And then she would come out of the store and she would go into the cemetery every day about 5 o'clock. And the kids in the community would watch this, and a few of them one day said, you know, that old lady must be homeless, and she must be living and sleeping in the cemetery. We need to follow her to see where she goes into the cemetery and where she lives. And so they got their little plan together, and sure enough, about 5 o'clock, this lady came down the street, went into the corner store, and got this piece of bread and this container of milk. And she came out of the corner store and crossed the street and went into the cemetery, and the kids were following behind her, and they kept behind her at a certain distance to make sure that they stayed out of sight. And she's walking into the cemetery, and they're hiding behind trees, and she's still walking, and they're hiding behind tombstones trying to see where she is going to go. And then they were trying to figure out how deep she was going to be going back into the cemetery. But all of a sudden, she got to the middle of the cemetery, and then she turned right and started to walk out of the cemetery. And the kids were following her, and she got to the gate of the cemetery and looked at the gate, and then she crossed the street of the cemetery, and the kids were a little bit confused as to where it is. And across the street, there was this huge mansion. She got to the light and crossed the street, walked up the stairs, and reached into her purse and pulled out the key and opened the door and unlocked the door and walked in this big mansion. And the kids figured out that she wasn't living or sleeping in the cemetery. She was just walking through the cemetery to get home. Well, the Jacksons may take Reverend Jesse Jackson to Oakwood, and you'd go by and visit the crypt or go by and visit the plot every now and then, but Reverend Jackson will not be at Oakwood. Reverend Jackson is going through Oakwood on his way home. He'll be at home with the rest of those who have come before us that are the stalwarts that served, like the Dr. King and John Lewis and Ralph Abernathy, and those who have been on the front lines and the examples for all of us, teaching us what it is to be of service. I had the privilege and the honor of working and volunteering at Rainbow Push. I started going to Rainbow Push in 1995 or 96, but I really got engaged with Rainbow Push in 2003 when I met Bonita Parker, who was working as the CFO at the time at Rainbow Push. And we had an issue with the state of Illinois, and the state of Illinois were passing a policy where they were making mortgage brokers responsible for appraisals at the time, and also charging mortgage brokers with or holding mortgage brokers responsible for predatory lending, which mortgage brokers are not decision makers in terms of whether somebody gets a mortgage or does not. That is set by the mortgage banker. And so we went to Rainbow Push at that time, myself and some other colleagues, and Bonita Parker grabbed a hold of this issue, and I started to work with her on this issue, and we started to work on other issues, and I got really involved with Rainbow Push. I later became one of the facilitators for the Business Roundtable that happened prior to the forum, or the Saturday morning forum. So there was always a Business Roundtable that went from 8 o'clock until 10 or 9:30, and then we would go into the forum. And so we would have people who would come that would be speakers or presenters at the Business Roundtable. And then myself, and I forget the gentleman's name that I worked with, who is gone on, he's passed on as well, that was a facilitator. I then went on to set up the foreclosure workshop at Rainbow Push, which in turn was a platform that Reverend Jackson was able to use, and Wells Fargo contributed almost $500,000 to Rainbow Push to put forth this program to help people who were in these upside down mortgages and that sort of thing. They brought in NACA and to help people who were in these predatory type loans or these upside down loans. And so, but I have and also had the privilege to work with Reverend Willie Barrow. I was able to go on 2 different of negotiating settlements, one with Reverend Barrow and one with Reverend Jackson. The one with Reverend Jackson was when the railroad workers were striking because the railroad was not agreeing to the terms that the union railroad workers were looking for. And Reverend Jackson, they came to Rainbow Push asking for help, and Reverend Jackson went and met with the heads of the railroad, and he took a squadron of us with him, and we sat there in that conference room and we watched the majesty of Reverend Jackson's ability to negotiate, and using that real mild-mannered tone of his and talking with the heads of the railroad. And when we emerged out of that meeting, those executives had agreed to negotiate with the railroad workers, and they met some terms, and railroad workers got some, maybe all of what they were asking as a result of Reverend Jackson's intervention. And then I went on another mission with Reverend Willie Barrow, who had a completely different style. That's why she's called Little Warrior. That's the Reverend Willie Taplin Barrow, where there was this Indian couple that was being taken advantage of by the bank. And so Reverend Barrow took me and some others out with her, along with the couple, to meet with the president of the bank. We met with the president of the bank. The president of the bank, Reverend Barrow, in her usual fashion, was able to get the president of the bank to agree that the couple had complied and fulfilled their agreement with the bank, and the bank had to release their, at the time, $600,000. This was a couple that was pretty wealthy, but they were being taken advantage of by the bank, and Reverend Willie Barrow got involved, and as a result, was able to find a resolution for that couple. A lot of the work that Reverend Jackson did, a lot of the phone calls that Reverend Jackson made that facilitated somebody getting a job, or somebody getting a corporate position, or other people getting a franchise. There are many people who have franchises at Burger King, McDonald's, and other as a result of Reverend Jackson's work and phone calls that he's made. He spent a lot of time making phone calls, writing letters. So he was not always in front of the camera where Reverend Jackson's influence was. Of course, you all know that Reverend Jackson ran for president of the United States in 1984. It wasn't that he was running because he wanted to. He ran because he said that they couldn't get anybody else to do so, and he had to do so in order to change how they were distributing the delegates. And as a result of that, his campaign precipitated the change of the way that the delegates were voted. It went from winner take all to proportion representation, meaning that if you got 40% of the vote, then you got 40% of the delegates. That happened as a result of Reverend Jackson's campaign in 1984, thereby setting the pathway for Bill Clinton to become president in 1992, and for Barack Obama to become president in 2009. He was elected in 2008, became president in 2009. So his contributions of service and advocacy are vast and widespread. And I had the opportunity to work closely with him and to learn from him. And one of the things that I learned from Reverend Jackson as an advocate is that you continue to move forward as long as you believe that you are on the right side of an issue, that you continue to move forward. That is one of the greatest, or probably the most profound lesson that I learned from Reverend Jackson. He also would tell us, stories sitting in his office, because he was very welcoming, and his office door, in many respects, for the most part, was open, and he welcomed people to come in. And I don't ever recall in a time where, we would throw us out of the office, and we would have the opportunity to sit there. And one of the stories that I remember him telling, that he used the scenario of a football game and football players. There are 11 men on each side, on the offensive side and on the defensive side. And of the offense is moving forward to score, to get past the defense, to get into the end zone and to score a touchdown. And the defense, his job is looking forward to stopping the offense. And even though the defense is trying to prevent and the offense is trying to go on down the field, both of them are looking forward. He would say something like, you can't spend all your time looking in the rearview mirror. You spend all your time looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to crash. He also said that in this game of life, if you are in the game of life and you are fighting, you're going to get a little dirty if you're in the game. The only way to stay clean is to be on the sideline, on the bench, and never get in the game. You'll never get any dirt on your uniform, but you will never have a chance to score, or you will never have a chance to stop someone from scoring. And if you are in the game, you're going to commit some fouls, you're going to make some penalties, then you suffer the consequences of those penalties, but you get back on the field and you continue to forge forward. That's one of the greatest analogies and one of the greatest lessons that I learned from Reverend Jackson, is that no matter what, you continue to move forward. And I can't remember a time that Reverend Jackson, despite what the opposition may be, despite what the criticism of him may have been, despite whatever disagreement someone may have had of him, including myself, Reverend Jackson never stopped forging ahead. He never surrendered. He never relented. Even to his last day, he never surrendered. That is the lesson that all of us should take, and all of us can learn from, is to never, ever quit. Because actually, we all do it based on what you're determined to do, based on whatever your determination is. We all do it. Whatever it is that you want to do and you're determined to do it, nothing is going to stop you from doing it. So this is my tribute to Reverend Jackson. Next week, I'm going to have a panel of people on who have worked with Reverend Jackson far more years than I did, and people who had worked even closer with Reverend Jackson than I did. That we are going to have a panel of people, panel discussion, to come on and to share some of the inner workings and their experiences with Reverend Jackson, So we will continue to celebrate him. But the best way to honor someone that you really respected, the best way to honor that person is not by showing up at their ceremony, not by just remembering their name and their work, but the best way to honor someone is to repeat what you learned from them and to repeat the work and continue the work that they were doing. That is the best way to honor Reverend Jesse Jackson. If you believe in honoring Reverend Jackson, then that is what we should do. We should get even more engaged with Rainbow Push to see what it is that and how it is that we can continue the struggle and the fight for our people. Not for Rainbow Push, but for our people. That is the way that we honor those people who have come before us, those people who laid a foundation, who committed themselves to it. Let us continue and let us bring our young people, bring them to push. I hear people always talking about, I was a push baby. Okay, let's bring some more push babies to grow up in push and to become ambassadors at push and ambassadors for humanity and for our communities. I have some clips. I'm going to play some clips of Reverend Jackson, and here is at the DNC. It is something that we tend to recognize the greatness in people when they're gone. And Reverend Jesse Jackson is really no different. Those of us who had the chance to serve with him, but certainly we recognize the specialness of the person. And when I went to look at some of the clips, when I looked at the campaign and the DNC, when Reverend was running in 1988, to see the sea of people who were supporting Reverend Jackson, black and white, that were supporting the work of Reverend Jackson at the time. And so I'm going to play a few clips here up until we close out the broadcast. And if you'd like to call, you can call the number and 951-221-8221. You can call in if you have, and certainly if you've volunteered at Push, or if you've got a story that you'd like to share, give me a call, and I certainly will have you to share. But let's take a look at some of the clips. When I was sitting there just watching that clip and watching the looks on people's faces, what I was seeing is there was that one thing that Jesse always talked about is hope, keeping hope alive. We might not have the reality of what it is that we're hoping for right now, but boy, things like that and getting to those positions, or making that progress is change from hope prior to. Now here was Reverend Jackson talking about the economics and the march when he was much younger. This is when he was on with Tony Brown. You all may remember Tony Brown, who is still with us, by the way. Tony Brown from the Tony Brown's Journal. Here,
we're really putting an awful lot of emphasis into dealing with the effects of this economy upon all poor people, our people in particular. I think our movement now has to have a dual focus: economic generation and spiritual regeneration. Economic generation to the extent that we have more than 6 million people unemployed, 25 million people making less than $3,000 a year, another 25 million less than 6,000, another 25 million less than 9,000. And given the inflated economy, that means that you have 3 levels of real poverty in the country. So that is a critical question. On the other hand, we have a kind of deteriorating spiritual condition in the black community, where our young people are trapped pushing dope in their veins rather than hope in their brains, and pickling their brains with liquor and using all kinds of ways to escape reality. It is at that level that we must be spiritually regenerated, because if we have a new school and don't have the will to learn, it's of no avail. Or if we got a job and don't have the will to work, or we have the opportunity and can't seize it because we've tripped out. So it is at that level we must have a dual focus. I guess biblically speaking, you would say that man cannot live by bread alone. You need the bread and the spiritual development. The question becomes, how do you break such a recession as this? Number one, you point to the weaknesses of it. The inflation that we're now on is not a consumer-inspired inflation where people have spent too much, but rather because the super rich and the military budget have been made into sacred cows. Ford says he's going to save $5 billion in surtax. Well, the fact is the military budget's growth is $7 billion a year. Why is that $7 billion sacred? You ask people making $15,000 a year to tighten up their belts. Well, they're already wearing suspenders because their real income has been eaten up by inflation. Then he says that if we save $20 billion from federal spending, we can break stagflation. Well, the Proxima report indicates that the military spent beyond its appropriations last year $27 billion. Now, that plus the super rich not being taxed properly and being allowed to develop monopolies and run competition out of business, that is why the economy is jammed. So, on the one hand, we must know that. On the other hand, we must prepare to hit these streets marching again en masse. January 15th this year, which is Dr. King's birth date, we're going to celebrate it by marching in at least 50 cities simultaneously. Marching, I might add, behind the Hawkins full employment bill, demanding that once and for all that is declared in this country that everybody has a right to a job, a decent house, and medical care. In my judgment, that's where the struggle is now. It's not as much civil rights as it is silver rights. It's a matter of redefining the economy.
Not as much civil rights. Let's see. This is the opening speech for Jesse at the DNC.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight, we pause and
give praise and honor to God for being good enough to allow us to be at this place at this time. When I look out at this convention, I see the face of America, red, yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight, the real Rainbow Coalition. All of us who are here think that we are seated, but we're really standing on someone's shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Rosa Parks. The mother of the Civil Rights Movement.
He recognized Rosa Parks. I read some time ago that the owner of the, I believe it was the Detroit Tigers and the hockey team there, quietly paid Rosa Parks rent on her apartment until she died. For years, he paid her rent, didn't make any announcements about it, just quietly took care of paying her rent until she died. More than, I believe it was more than 10 years that he paid Rosa Parks rent. Let's take a look at some more clips of Jesse Jackson's speech in the DNC as he was campaigning to become the nominee for the president of the United States.
I want to express my deep love and appreciation for the support my family has given me over these past months. They have endured pain, anxiety, threat, and fear, but they have been strengthened and made secure by our faith in God, in America, and in you. Your love has protected us and made us strong. To my wife, Jackie, the foundation of our family. To our 5 children whom you met tonight. To my mother, Mrs. Helen Jackson, who is present tonight. And to our grandmother, Mrs. Matilda Burns. To my brother Chuck and his family. To my mother-in-law, Mrs. Gertrude Brown, who just last month at age 61 graduated from Hampton Institute. A marvelous achievement. I offer my appreciation to Mayor Andrew Young, who has provided such gracious hospitality to all of us this week, and a special salute to President Jimmy Carter. President Carter, President Carter restored honor to the White House after Watergate. He gave many of us a special opportunity to grow. For his kind words, for his unwavering commitment to peace. I want to express my deep love and appreciation for the support my family has given me over these past months. They have endured pain, anxiety, threat, and fear, but they have been strengthened and made secure by our faith in God, in America, and in you. Your love has protected us and made us strong. To my wife, Jackie, the foundation of our family. To our 5 children whom you met tonight. To my mother, Mrs. Helen Jackson, who is present tonight, and to our grandmother, Mrs. Matilda Burns, to my brother Chuck and his family, to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Gertrude Brown, who just last month at age 61 graduated from Hampton Institute, a marvelous achievement. I offer my appreciation to Mayor Andrew Young, who has provided such gracious hospitality to all of us this week, and a special salute to President Jimmy Carter. President Carter, President Carter restored honor to the White House after Watergate. He gave many of us a special opportunity to grow. For his kind words, for his unwavering commitment to peace in the world, and for the voters that came from his family, every member of his family, led by Billy and Amy, I offer my special thanks to the Carter family.
You know, Jimmy Carter was my favorite president for more than reasons of public policy. When I met Jimmy Carter, he was the only president that I had desire to meet. And I had the opportunity of meeting him back in 2000, I believe it was 15 or 16. And I owe that to a very special person who tragically passed away through a car accident a couple of years ago. And she got me into, when I found out that Jimmy Carter was here on a book tour, she got me in to see him. He was at the University of Chicago, and I got to go in to meet him and get his book. And of course, he signed the book, and it was a really good book. But that was a great time for me. But Jimmy Carter was just one of those persons. And then reading and learning that Jimmy Carter and his wife took in a woman, even from the time when he was a governor in Georgia. This woman who had been wrongfully incarcerated for protecting herself, and Jimmy Carter and his wife never, ever gave up on her. And when she was finally released of that, they fought for her restoration of that. They took her in, and she actually was the caretaker of their daughter. And they then, when they became the president of the United States, they took her into the White House, despite all of the opposition that they got from the handlers and all of that sort of. They took this black woman in who had been convicted of a crime and never abandoned her and never forsook her. And they took her in at the White House. And when I read that is what the Carters did, because I'd never known that about the Carters. And of course, I didn't really hear it publicized that much. And maybe it was publicized, but I was very, very young at that time. And I believe that Jimmy Carter was the very first person, because I was just 18 years of age at that time. So that was the very first president or an election that I participated in. So Jimmy Carter still remains my most favorite president of the United States. We're going to listen to a little bit more of Reverend Jesse Jackson at the 1988 Democratic National Convention as he is lobbying for or hoping to become the Democratic nominee. And he came very, very close to, I think he came second to becoming the nominee in 1988. Here's Jesse Jackson.
My right and my privilege to stand here before you has been won in my lifetime by the blood and the sweat of the innocent. 24 years ago, the late Fannie Lou Hamer and Aaron Henry, who sits here tonight from Mississippi, were locked out onto the streets in Atlantic City, the head of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. But tonight, a black and white delegation from Mississippi is headed by Ed Cole, a black man from Mississippi, 24 years later. Many were lost in the struggle for the right to vote. Jimmy Lee Jackson, a young student, gave his life. Vala Luizzo, a white mother from Detroit, called nigger lover and brains blown out at point blank range. Surrounded Goodman and Cheney, two Jews and a black, found in a common grave, bodies riddled with bullets in Mississippi. The 4 darling little girls in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, they died that we might have a right to live. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lies only a few miles from us tonight. Tonight he must feel good as he looks down upon us. We sit here together, a rainbow coalition, the sons and daughters of slave masters and the sons and daughters of slaves sitting together around the common table to decide the direction of our party and our country. His heart would be full tonight as a testament to the struggles of those who have gone before, as a legacy for those who will come after, as a tribute to the endurance, the patience, the courage of our forefathers and mothers, as an assurance that their prayers are being answered, that their work has not been in vain, and the hope is eternal. Tomorrow night, my name will go in nomination for the presidency of the United States of America. We meet tonight at the crossroads, a point of decision. Shall we expand, be inclusive, find unity and power, or suffer division and impotence? We come to Atlanta, the cradle of the old South, the crucible of the new South. Tonight there is a sense of celebration because we are moved, fundamentally moved from racial battlegrounds by law to economic common ground. The moral challenge to move to higher ground, common ground. Think of Jerusalem, the intersection where many trails met, a small village that became the birthplace for 3 great religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Why was this village so blessed? Because it provided a crossroads where different people met, different cultures, different civilizations could meet and find common ground. When people come together, flowers always flourish. The air is rich with the aroma of a new spring. Take New York, the dynamic metropolis. What makes New York so special? It's the invitation at the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses who yearn to breathe free, not restricted to English only. Many people, many cultures, many languages, with one thing in common: They yearn to breathe free, common ground. Tonight in Atlanta, for the first time in this century, we convene in the South, a state where governors once stood in schoolhouse doors, where Julian Bond was denied his seat in the state legislature because of his conscientious objection to the Vietnam War, a city that through its 5 black universities has graduated more black students than any city in the world. Atlanta, now a modern intersection of the New South. Common ground. That's the challenge of our party tonight. Left wing, right wing. Progress will not come through boundless liberalism, nor static conservatism, but at the critical mass of mutual survival, it takes 2 wings to fly. Whether you're a hawk or a dove, you're just a bird living in the same environment, in the same world. The Bible teaches that when lions and lambs lie down together, none will be afraid, and there will be peace in the valley. It sounds impossible. Lions eat lambs. Lambs sensibly flee from lions. Yet even lions and lambs find common ground. Why? Because neither lion nor lambs want the forest to catch on fire. Neither lions nor lambs want acid rain to fall. Neither lions nor lambs can survive nuclear war. If lions and lambs can find common ground, surely we can as well as civilized people. The only time that we win is when we come together. In 1960, John Kennedy, the late John Kennedy, beat Richard Nixon by only 112,000 votes. Less than 1 vote per precinct. We won by the margin of our hope. He brought us together. He reached out. He had the courage to defy his advisors and inquire about Dr. King's jailing in Albany, Georgia. We won by the margin of our hope, inspired by courageous leadership. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson brought both wings together, the thesis, the antithesis, and the creative synthesis, and together we won. In 1976, Jimmy Carter unified us again, and we won. When we do not come together, we never win. In 1968, the division and despair in July led to our defeat in November. In 1980, rancor in the spring and the summer led to Reagan in the fall. When we divide, we cannot win. We must find common ground as a basis for survival and development and change and growth.
You know, a lot of people didn't know that when John Kennedy was running at the time, Daddy King went to Richard Nixon, Attorney General, and asked for them to get his son out of jail. Richard Nixon's people decided not to do anything. Daddy King went to John F. Kennedy's camp and asked for him to do something about getting his son out. John F. Kennedy did that, and as a result, Daddy King endorsed John F. Kennedy for the presidency of the United States. Before that, he was supporting the Republican ticket, but because the Republicans would not do anything about getting Dr. King out of prison, and he went to John F. Kennedy, then is where the big shift to the Democratic Party came for particularly our community that supported John F. Kennedy in the election, and John F. Kennedy ended up becoming the president of the United States. That is here's I got a couple more clips that I can show, and this is a clip talking about Jesse's mother. Remember, Jesse was born out of wedlock from the neighbor who was married, and his mother was a teenage mother. And Jesse is talking about that experience of being abandoned by his father and by his mother, having to apologize.
Well, because of the moral standards of our church community, they frowned upon babies being born out of wedlock. And when mother became pregnant, was so prominent and so well known, it became an issue. So finally, she had to leave the choir, bring me down front to the altar and apologize for my birth. She was accepted, received again, and back at her special place in the church for which she never left. But that was the moral standards of that day.
And he talked about how they had a budget of $9 to do grocery shopping in the early part of his life.
My father, every week, he'd come home, we would go to buy groceries. Maybe his limit would be $9, $8.50 or something. And I could count better than he could count, and I was in the 5th grade. And I would be trying, if I miscalculated, and we were like $9.60 rather than $8.80. Even though we shopped at that grocery store all the time, it was not like bring the money back or get it next week. We had to run that line and take the product out and put it back on the shelf. It was humiliating, and never want to be in that position.
Very interesting story and very interesting life. Like I said, next week, I'm hoping it's going to be next week that we're going to have a panel in place. We're going to be talking about Reverend Jackson Moore, celebrating his life. But this week, Friday, meet me at the House of Hope, 10 o'clock on Friday, out on 115th, right off of the Bishop Ford. So they'll be celebrating. That's the big community celebration of Reverend Jackson at the House of Hope. And then we'll be back over at the Rainbow Push Coalition at 9:30 East 50th Street for his final homegoing service before he will be interned at the Oakwood Cemetery. That's going to do it for us tonight. I want to thank all of you for joining us here on the Monday night edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And remember, let us continue to forge ourselves together. And if you haven't done so, text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 and get involved so that we can continue the legacy to fight for what is right and what is righteous and what is just. That's going to do it for me for this Monday night edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio.